Hi there, this is James Tripp. Welcome to this video which is on creating hypnotic feedback loops using clean language. Now if you've been following my video blogging since way back in the day, you will have heard me mention clean language many times before, especially in the past. You may know that it was part of the genesis for the whole hypnosis without trance approach to hypnosis, and I know many people who have trained with me have gone on to train in clean language and have been using that to get really fantastic shifts, really fantastic results with their clients. But I'm also aware that there may be a whole bunch of people watching this who are going, clean what? Clean language? Huh? What's that? So what I want to do in this video is I want to very quickly outline what clean language is, how it relates to hypnosis, and how you can use clean language, what its specialism is in many senses, in terms of what I would call creating very powerful personalized feedback loops, psychoactive feedback loops with clients, and being able to then nudge those feedback loops in useful, productive, generative directions. This is where clean language is really powerful. For me, this is where it dovetails with hypnosis. Indeed, you could argue that clean language just is hypnosis. It's just another form of hypnosis. Now, clean language was created by a guy called David Grove, who was a hypnotist, and David Grove had some questions about the mind, how the mind worked, how the mind processed stuff. He developed from his original hypnosis training and some influences from elsewhere a particular way of doing hypnosis that worked almost entirely content-wise with what came from the client. So there was nothing brought in from the outside. Most hypnosis approaches work by bringing a lot of material in from the outside, a lot of metaphors in from the outside, a lot of structures in. Clean language keeps the content 100% of the client's generation and creation. This gives it a very powerful edge, which I'll explain in a moment. But it doesn't just leave it there. It then takes, on a process level, it nudges the cognitive processes of the client in useful generative directions. So what we've got with clean language is we've basically got a set of 9 to 12 basic questions, depending on how you count them, a whole bunch of peripheral questions. Technically, you can create your own clean questions when you understand the format, but you've got these 9 to 12 basic questions along with what's called the full clean syntax. And the full clean syntax is basically a hypnotic syntax that enables you to feed back what you have elicited through the questions directly back to the client. So you've got these questions on the one hand, you've got the syntax on the other hand, and this is what creates a feedback loop. Now this is often referred to, I often refer this to as psychoactive facilitation, because the stuff you're drawing out of the client is stuff that is deeply personal, deeply meaningful, deeply resonant for the client. You're drawing it out and then you're feeding it back in. And this creates the loop. Now the question you ask, it doesn't just elicit information, it also nudges the direction of attention. My basic definition of hypnosis is the use of language and communication to direct attention, lead cognition and seed ideas for the purpose of leading someone into an altered experience of their reality. Now with clean language, we are asking questions that elicit very powerful material from people, but they also direct attention in very specific ways. They direct attention, they lead cognition. What clean language does not do, which most hypnosis does, is seed ideas. In fact, it does its very best to not seed ideas, to simply direct attention and lead cognition in useful directions in a way that completely honors the person that you are working with as a creative entity, imbued with an innate and generative intelligence. So it's very much like this idea that Erickson had of the unconscious mind being filled with all the resources it needs. This is what clean language honors by not seeding ideas. However, if you know me, you'll know I'm not 100% clean. Clean language is just something in my toolbox. Clean facilitation, psychoactive facilitation of this type is just something in my toolbox. But I want to explain to you how it works. Now, I'm not going to give you all of the the 9 to 12 basic questions right here. But what I am going to say is these questions can be used to elicit all manner of things, often metaphorically based things, but they can be conceptually based or emotively based material from the client. And they can include problem states, they can include outcome positions, and they can include resources. And these are the three most important things that I'm interested in when working using clean language as a hypnotic protocol. So what we do with this is we elicit, then we model out, we get more depth, more detail on any of these three things, and it could go beyond, but this is what we're interested in doing. And how it works in terms of a feedback loop is where the syntax comes in, the full syntax. And this is what I want to share with you right now, is the full syntax, more the syntax than the questions themselves. So let's say we've been running a process with a client. It's an interactive, constant feedback loop between the hypnotist and the client. And we've elicited a shift and a resource. And it might be the client says, and I feel alive. That's what they feed back to you. They feel alive. Now that word, alive, and the way they say that word is deeply personal and meaningful to them. Now, if we respond at that point going, yeah, and that feels good, doesn't it? They might go, yeah. Now that's not a clean response because we're framing what alive is in a different term. Now, it may feel good, but that actually may take them away from the resonance and the power of alive, rather than taking them into it. So let's say the client says, and I feel alive. The full syntax clean language response is going to be, and you feel alive. Now, that's the first part of it. Client says, I just feel alive, and you go, and you feel alive. And there's only one response they can get from that, which is, yes. They're going to go further into the alive. It's going to be a complete match for their reality. Why? Because you fed it back. This is taking the feedback loop in. So and remember pacing and leading. This is a pace of their reality. They say, I feel alive. You say, and you feel alive. And as you are feeling alive now, what kind of alive is that alive? Now, that is basically the clean language full syntax. Now, I know there are some people out there who might be watching this. I learned clean language from two sources. I learned clean language from the Penny Tompkin and James Lawley lineage. I also learned clean language from the Norman Vorton lineage, which has nothing to do with the James and Penny lineage. So the way I do clean language is a little bit different from the James and Penny lineage, and there'll be some purists of that lineage who will say, hang on a second, James, you were doing some bits that weren't quite orthodox, clean there. Maybe they were not, but coming from the Norman Vorton lineage, there's a little bit more freedom about how you do the syntax, how you do the questions, and that gels better with my spirit, my nature. So there's a couple of bits in, like I put a now in there that might not be in the classic full syntax. I like to be a little bit freer with it, but the basic structure is and pace, and when you pace, and then you ask the next question. So it could be and alive. And as you're feeling alive now, what kind of alive is this alive? Or is there anything else about this alive? Now, also clean language purists from the James and Penny school might say, hang on a second, James, you said what kind of alive is this alive and not that alive? In the orthodoxy, it's that. Why? Because as a hypnotist, I adapt. If it's a resource, I want somebody associated more, so I'm going to use the word this because it brings it more present. If I were working with a problem state and I wanted to create distance, if they said, and it's crushing, I might say, and it's crushing. And when crushing, what kind of crushing is that crushing? Because I want to dissociate, so I'm going to use the that back. So this is how we feed back. This is how the full syntax feeds back. Now, when somebody's in this space, this is not a conversational zone. It is not a conversational zone. from the Norman Vorton lineage that I learned from, Norman Vorton would teach about David Grove's 4 quadrants. I'm going to just talk about the first 2 of David Grove's 4 quadrants here, as I remember it, and this may have transformed over my time. It's a long time since I trained with Norman, and I'm an irreverent kind of person, so I tend to go my own way with things. But quadrant 1 is the conversational space. It's the interpersonal space. And the conversational interpersonal space is where we spend most of our time. Now, if you're doing kind of truly, conversational hypnosis, truly covert hypnosis, you're going to be in the conversational space. Now, when you're in the conversational space, the experience most people have is one of conversation. There's a lot of interpersonal stuff there, a lot of eye contact, a lot of little bits of social ritual, all of these things that enable things to flow in an everyday kind of a way. Now, if you're an overt hypnotist, if you do overt hypnosis, formal hypnosis, you'll know that when you're doing hypnosis, you move out of the conversational space. You kind of move into this different way of being, this different way of engaging that is inherently more hypnotic. Now, this is what David Grove calls going into quadrant 2, which is going psychoactive. At this point, all the interpersonal stuff, all of the little bits of social ritual, the way we use inflection to keep things conversational and light and all of this, it drops away and we drop into a different zone, which is experienced very differently. To use one classic hypnosis metaphor, it becomes very trancy. So as you listen to this full syntax, if you were listening to this thinking, well, that's kind of a bit weird sounding, it sure is, because it's meant to be used, the full syntax in this way, in quadrant 2, in the psychoactive space, in the trance zone, if you like. So yeah, it kind of sounds weird and a bit trippy and a bit out there, but it draws people deeply in to very powerful, very profound experiences, because it takes them deeply into their stuff. It takes them deeply into their stuff, takes them deeply into their own system. But then depending on the choice of question, what kind of X is that X? Whereabouts is that X? Then what happens? What happens next? Is there a relationship between X and Y? Depending on the question will depend on the cognitive connections that are facilitated. But you are taking people deeply into their stuff. And by God, is it hypnotic? Is it powerful? Going deeply in. You don't need a trance induction, because people become immediately absorbed in this stuff because it is profoundly relevant to them. It is not some kind of outside concept that's being brought in. It's their stuff. It's their meaning making that you're working with. You are building the hypnotic experience from their own meanings. This is why it's so powerful, so impactful. And then you're making choices, you're making strategic choices as you set this feedback loop up, questions, full syntax fed back in, using tonality, using pacing, using leading, fed back in, creating this hypnotic feedback loop. But then the question is, it's a strategic question, which direction do we nudge the system? And of course, we're always nudging the system towards new discovery, new connections, new options, new choices. We don't have to tell them any of that stuff, because we're honoring the deep intelligence of the system that is this person. So this is fundamentally how clean language works from a hypnotic perspective. And I cannot emphasize enough just how deeply hypnotic this is when it's done in a hypnotic way. A lot of people don't really do this in a very hypnotic way. They keep it a bit more uptime, a bit more conversational, or they choose how far they're going to go from the conversational quadrant into the psychoactive quadrant. Now, you'll find around this video some information around the Clean Language workshop, Clean Language for Hypnotists, that I'm running with Judy Reese in January. And it's fair to say that Judy and I are going to be coming at this from slightly different directions and finding where we're congruent. Judy is a master of elicitation. She is an absolute master of eliciting significant, deep, profound material from people. She's very, very, very good at this. This is her specialism. My specialism is more the feeding back in side of things. So we've got, within the clean language package, we already have a language structure, a basic template. Now, even if you use this outside of the rest of clean language, this will really add to your hypnosis toolkit, really getting and understanding this, what's called the full syntax, and learning how to riff around that gives you a little hypnosis template in and of itself for kind of on-the-fly hypnosis that you can weave in with the other work that you already do. But in addition to that, what we're going to be sharing on the workshop is how you incorporate working cleanly with more classic hypnotic suggestion structurings, if you like, in order to be able to create for people very deep, very profound, personalized suggestions and trances. So what we're actually doing with the clean is getting a bit dirty with it. So that's going to appeal to some. I think it's going to appeal more to the hypnotists out there who don't mind being a bit more dirty, a bit more directive, are happy to mix it up, bringing a few concepts in here and there, and to play with the format a bit. One of the places where this is really powerful, though, is in learning the clean approach. It's not to say the clean approach is correct. It's like learning the yin approach. You could learn a yin approach to hypnosis. You could learn a yang approach to hypnosis. And of course, I have my Taoist leanings. When the two come together, that's where you really get something complete and sweet and powerful. So this is my view on clean language. I'm speaking for myself here. I'm not speaking for my co-trainer and facilitator, Judy Reese, who's going to have a whole bunch of different perspectives and a whole bunch of different views. If you want to participate in this training, you're going to get two differing but complementary views on how this stuff works, and you're going to get something that you can take away. And if you're doing client work with people, and this is particularly significant for people who do hypnotic change work and this kind of thing, you will have the door open to a whole new world of possibilities in terms of your interactions with your clients and creating very profound, personalized suggestions and trances that are going to be deeply personal and impactful to them. Okay, so if you want to find out about clean language for hypnotists, information is going to be below the video, or at least a link to the information, or around the video. Somewhere near the video you will find a way through to where you can find out when it's happening. Where it's happening is London. It's happening at the end of January. Probably would have been nice to show up on the video with the dates. I'll scroll them up along the bottom of the screen, or somewhere on the screen. And if you have any questions, please do ask via the information page. We can update the information page as we go to make sure everybody is understanding what they need to understand. Okay, take care. And if you book on, very much looking forward to seeing you in January.